listening to the Identity at the Center podcast. This is the show that talks about identity and access management and making sure you know who has access to what. Let's get started. Welcome to the Identity at the Center podcast. I'm Jeff, and that's Jim. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Jeff. How are you?
Oh, not so bad. Yourself?
Good. We've been living in an oven here in Georgia for the last couple of days. It's over 90 degrees today. How are things in good old Chicago, the Windy City?
Today was a little bit warm. I think we got up to like mid 80s, I want to say, but we've been kind of going back and forth between like high 70s, 80s, rain, and then I think we're supposed to get back down to like the 40s, 50s over the weekend. So typical Chicago spring where it's, heavy jacket in the morning, shorts in the afternoon, and then you're back to heavy jacket in the evening.
Yeah, one of my coworkers was telling me, and he's out of Denver, that it was snowing in Denver this morning, but it was like 85 degrees yesterday. So for me, those are the times where I always catch cold. And, I don't know what it is. It's like your body gets ready for that warm air, and then you hit it with the cold air and things go haywire.
Yep. All that pollen get kicked up. It's always allergy season too. So yeah, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's all those, pathogens and toxins that have been slumbering in the cold, and now they've become less dormant. But I am not a microbiologist or a virologist, so I will leave it to someone else to tell me why people seem to get sicker when there's a seasonal change.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hopefully all these seasonal changes are the only causes of illness rather than another pandemic, because I've been quite happy about not being in a pandemic. Planning to go to the Identiverse conference in June, and it's don't want to have the rug pulled out from under me. It's not that far away. I think I'll be all right.
Yeah, I'm still on the fence if I'll be able to make it or not. So hopefully I'll have more clarity on that in a couple of weeks. But I have a feeling I'm going to be a game time decision, or if I am able to get out there, it'll probably be a shorter visit. Won't be able to stay for the entire thing. So kind of have to see how that goes. But hopefully you'll get out there and have a good time.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be a good time. Anyone who's listening and interested in doing the fist bump or just having a hallway conversation, reach out to me on LinkedIn, shoot me a message, and we'll find a way to link up while we're out there.
Yep, do the same. If you're going to be at RSA, I'll be out there. I know I've got a few people reach out, so looking forward to those fist bumps. And whatever conversations might take place in lovely San Francisco, somewhere in or around the Moscone Center, which is kind of dead center in the city there. I love San Francisco. Just the weather is always fantastic. It's one of my favorite spots.
I think it's so funny that, you love traveling. But I will say that when the pandemic hit and, the mantra was, save a life, stay inside, you're like, okay, you're all good with that. Like,
yeah,
I don't
absolutely.
think you left your house for like a month straight at one point.
No, it was great. I think, I enjoy my solo time as much as probably the next person. And it doesn't bother me at all to not have to, I know some people are very social like that human interaction. I am an android of some variety and I'm totally fine, living on a mountain by myself, being the hermit, if that's what it takes. So I'm totally cool with that.
Now you're totally cool with that, and I'm not. I need human interaction, if not every day, pretty close to it. But you also are kind of the connoisseur of using delivery services, right? I mean, Instacart and Grubhub and all the like. I mean, you don't mind, you like doing that.
Yeah. I mean, I think they fill a need. I think there's value there if there's a service that saves you time and is worth the cost, which is always up for debate, right? Some people will say, I'd rather cut my own lawn. I don't want to do that. And my time is, I'd much rather do something else. I'm totally fine, paying for services, those sorts of things, for sure. Grubhub is one of those. Instacart. I don't say we use it all the time, but we certainly, leverage it when we're being lazy or just have too many things going on and want to have kind of a good meal, but, have it delivered rather than trying to do it ourselves.
Yeah. So me, I've got a cheap phone. So I to me, it sounds, oh, yeah, this is a great idea. I want some food from my favorite restaurant. I'd like to have it delivered. I go online, configure the order, then look at all the delivery fees. I'm like, forget about it. I just drive out there and get it myself.
See,
But
that's the
imagine,
trick. That's the trick, though, right? So if you're gonna order food, try to order it directly from the restaurant or whatever place, because certainly Grubhub, DoorDash, the others, they do add a markup on their menu sometimes versus what you would get directly. You'll still pay for the delivery and all that stuff, but if you have the option and the place you can order it directly from them, generally you'll get the same pricing as if you were there on site versus going through a third party like Grubhub or DoorDash or whatever.
yeah. And now you are in Chicago, but you're moving to North Carolina. We had a discussion about this. There's not, I lived in Carolina for a long time, and I love pizza. I was actually in Charlotte. And there was like one or two pizza places that had opened. There were people from New York who moved down, and they were pizza people, and it was like the only place you could go for good pie. But most of North Carolina, if you get outside of, you know, Charlotte, basically, you're not going to find very good pizza. Small places anyway. I'm not trying to start a war with anybody who thinks like Papa John's or Domino's is the best pizza. That's fine. You can have that. Um, but that was what I was looking for. Is like, oh, I want pizza from my favorite pizza place, which is nearby. Well, maybe 10 miles away. And I went and configured the order. It was $32 for a pizza. I was like, I'm just not doing that.
That's got to be a good pizza. I mean, I guess for me, that doesn't sound expensive for a good Chicago pizza. Luminati's, Giordano's, something deep dish with a bunch of toppings on it. That's about what I would expect to pay for a medium deep dish, for example.
Yeah, if you eat a Giordano's pizza though, it's like you eat one slice and you're full, and you're eating leftovers for a couple of days. But
Oh
I'm
yeah,
starting to get hungry even thinking about it.
yeah, it's
Um,
good stuff.
yeah, yeah. So imagine, actually, we don't have to imagine because this actually happened. But imagine if Grubhub offered free lunch, and
I'm
you
all over.
you
Sign
might
me
have
up.
to, yeah, you have to pay the fees, but the food is free. And what could happen? What could go wrong in a scenario like that?
Yeah, nothing could go wrong. I just want to say before we get into this, because I know we're going to go with it, is anytime this is a free lunch, the best thing that has come out of this whole pandemic thing, and of course I'm speaking as superlatives, is the fact that companies will now send, credits for DoorDash or Grubhub, and you can order whatever the heck you want, and you're not stuck with like food from a place that you don't normally eat or don't like or whatever it may be. Give me the $20 credit. I'll go order what I want. I love that.
Yeah, no, that was definitely a cool feature that it's kind of disappeared for me. I haven't seen one of those happen in a little while, but that used to be one of my favorite things.
Yeah, I I've been fortunate to get a couple here over the last month or so. So
Oh,
not gonna
lucky
throw that in your
you,
face.
Jeff. Lucky you, man. Rub
Free
it,
food,
don't
man. Free food.
rub it on in. But
Yeah.
so for anybody who's not aware, maybe missed this in the news, Grubhub offered free lunch to everybody in New York City. I think it was specific to New York. It was on Monday, and it like completely overwhelmed restaurants where like hundreds of orders were coming in for um, lunch delivery through Grubhub, and the restaurants were very unhappy about it, and people were very unhappy waiting for their lunches that never arrived or arrived hours later than they were supposed to. And it got me thinking about basically, obviously, poor planning, right? The idea that someone didn't foresee the possibility of this happening and launch, because you don't just all of a sudden say, hey, free lunch. We're just going to do that. Somebody decides on Friday and then you just send out the email on Monday, right? Somebody's thought about this and they didn't think that, well, maybe thousands of people are going to, you know, hammer the app and ask for the free lunch and put it, because everybody likes a free lunch, right? That it's going to overwhelm the system and that you're going to have a very poor user experience as a result. And it got me thinking about IAM projects and, planning for a go live of a new whatever system technology, and the amount of planning that has to go into that. I know that I've been on the planning end of a couple of projects like that, and I'm sure you have as well.
Yeah, I think everyone has been on the bad end of a poorly planned project. I think those still unfortunately make up a lot, but I think there's a lot of well executed projects too. Those are the ones that you probably don't hear about because there was nothing of note that happened. But yeah, poor planning for sure is still an issue. I think about this, going live, and I was thinking kind of as we're talking here, examples of what would a go live look like in the identity world, and it could be technical, it could be non-technical, maybe a little bit of both. So maybe something like, hey, we're changing our password policy. Be aware of it. And maybe there's no immediate even action that needs to be taken. It's more of an awareness of a policy change, right? Or maybe there's been like a process change. Maybe the technical tool being used isn't all that different, or it isn't even different at all, but the process has changed or something like that. Or maybe it is something more technical, like, hey, we're putting in a self-service password management system. Now you can reset your own passwords and you don't have to call the help desk or, whatever it may be. Or maybe it's self-service access requests, which I know a lot of companies try to get to is, hey, you no longer have to, submit a ticket and then someone's got to like read that ticket and figure out what the heck their person is asking for access and then route that for approvals and then figure out, okay, well, let's get them access to the system, right? Maybe it's more self-service. Or maybe it's something that's both. I'm thinking something like maybe something that requires registration. You are starting a new service. Maybe it is self-service password management. In the old days, when we had to use things like knowledge-based authentication, right? Go in, set up your profile before you need to use the self-service password reset, and set up your secret questions and answers and things like that. And there's a lot of different scenarios, and I'm sure we won't be able to cover them all here in this conversation. But as we're going along here, kind of think about launches of services, capabilities, maybe process changes or awareness of policy, right? Things like that.
Yeah, one thing that came to mind for me, obviously I've got my own experiences with projects that I've run, but I was thinking of we here at the Identity of the Center podcast don't like to pick on anyone. But I was thinking of one particular airline who their multi-factor authentication really wasn't multi-factor, it was multi-question, right? It was like you typed in your username and your 6-character password, and then you had to answer a secret question like, what was your favorite pet's name? Or what was your mother's name?
Like how we're all united together. Is that what we were talking about?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Now, I remember I didn't fly United that often, but there did come a time where I was like, I want to go and book a United flight. I need my ID number. I went to log in and it said, you can't log in until you actually, give us some more information and change your password. And I figure that probably got rolled out. Like most of the people who log into United every day probably had to do that like right away. Right. And I'm sure there's a whole planning process that went through that. But it's funny, like as I was going to kind of use that example, I was going to, thinking about IAM is like you're implementing this change to your users. And then I thought of a very funny thing that I heard, I forget where, but they were saying that IT and drug dealers are the only folks that refer to their customers as users. Yeah. So, our users could be, our workforce, or, kind of the enterprise scenario. They could be our partners, that B2B scenario, or it could be customers. And I think, the customer scenario probably in some ways provides the biggest challenge when you're rolling out a big change, like what we just described there on the password side, because, well, I think if, say, you were a major airline and you had millions of users and you've got people using whatever devices, they come to you with whatever ability to, interpret the words that you're putting on the screen. Maybe English is not their first language. Maybe maybe they're very technically, not technically very savvy. So you got all these factors. Plus, you may have people that are already doing things the right way. And then you've got how frequent are your users going to hit the system? So you've got all these factors that you need to think about that, and plus when your scale is millions and millions of users, it's probably even harder to plan than when you're talking enterprise, especially smaller enterprises. But one of the things from an enterprise perspective is that, if you roll something out and you really inconvenience somebody who's trying to get their job done at the last minute and they've got the ear of, say, the CEO, wow, what if you, for some reason, cut off the access or prevent somebody from getting that job done, like the CEO's administrative assistant, and they go to the CEO and say, these stupid people in IT did this and now I can't get my job done. So we're both going to have to work over the weekend. Wow, that's really not a good place to be in.
Yeah, I've been there. I think I've shared a story in the past, having to work on New Year's Eve one night, um, creating a bunch of accounts because business didn't communicate, promises were made, expectations were set that had no basis in reality whatsoever. And it was our job, basically my job, New Year's Eve, to make it a reality. The communication is the big thing, I think, here. I don't think there is a problem with over communicating, but there is definitely a problem with under communicating or not being clear, or making sure that whatever communication you're writing out for your audience can be easily understood, and that there's different variations of that based on who it is you're trying to reach. Different languages, different user types. You talked about sort of like the less technical among us. I think another really bad user type is the most technical. I am a terrible user because I think I know everything. Yeah, I got it. I'll just kind of skim through it. And then I'll run into a problem and be like, what the heck? Why doesn't this stupid thing work? And it's because I didn't follow the directions or whatever it may be. I thought I knew better. There are certainly people just like me out there who, they, have familiar with it and know enough to be dangerous, but can be just as bad, if not worse, than the folks who really have no clue kind of what's going on, but they are perfectly willing to follow directions as long as those directions are clear, step by step, and make sense to them.
Yeah, I think that, as you were going into that, I was thinking, yeah, well, let's talk about the people who don't read the communication. And I thought to myself, well, maybe we shouldn't pick on them. It's funny. Have you ever seen that email come through and like it's 50 lines long and 30 of them are highlighted in different colors and some of them are blinking text? You're like, okay, what am I supposed to focus on here? And why would somebody send an email that looks like this? This is awful.
Yeah. You know what really bugs me real quick about that is I use dark mode a lot for stuff. So Outlook, web browsers, whatever it may be. And people always seem to pick the worst highlight colors and text colors. It makes it absolutely unreadable if you're in dark mode. So please, if you're sending mass emails and you have, or you're sending any emails and you have colors, think about the people who use dark mode. Thank you. End of rant. Please continue.
End of rant. Yeah. But I think, over communicating, it starts getting tricky. It's not just sending the most emails. Hey, we sent our customers 20 emails. That actually can be really irritating and it can be so much noise people start to block it out. But then the other thing I was thinking was, we're in a totally different world where it's like you emailed it. Is that the most effective way? And it was words written out that people had to read. Is that the most effective way? What about social media? What about video? So I don't have one clear answer, but I think it really needs to be thought through. And I think if you're in a bigger company, working with people who are more expert on this, like we're IAM program managers, right? And we are rolling out a password change. We're rolling out multi-factor authentication. This might be the one or two things a year that affect our customers in a big enough way that we actually do need to send some communication so that they don't suffer. So we're not as good at it as other people who do this stuff all the time for the company. Maybe it's a communications expert. Maybe it's just somebody who's responsible for the customer, quote unquote, the customer. The guy from Office Space. I deal with the customer. What's wrong with you people? But that, those folks they're there to help you. So if you can tap into them, I think that can get you to so it's maybe it's not over communicating, it's appropriately communicating. And by tapping into somebody who knows what that means for your for your quote unquote users, that might be the right step.
Yeah, for sure. It doesn't have to be one size fits all. I mean, it's probably a mix of different messaging, timeframes, cadence, whatever it may be. But I guess what we're really harping on here is how important communication is to any change, right? Whether go live or maybe go dark if you're shutting down a system, same thing, right? Make sure people are aware of it. I'll point to US Bank. I'm a customer of theirs, and I get a ton of emails from them whenever they make a change to their UI of what to expect, when it's coming. And we're talking about a financial institution, so of course, fraud is a concern for people, and if something looks out of place, here's what's to look for that is good versus bad. If you think about it from that scenario as well, when you're rolling out any IAM services, think about how would you want to be treated? How would you want to be communicated to? And then leverage the expertise of those communication experts within the organization, whether it's like a marketing team or corporate communications. If you can't explain it to them, you need to think about how you're explaining it because they're, the role there that I see it is the communications team is going to be able to take your vision of how this works and actually turn it into instruction, into messaging, into marketing, whatever it might look like, to let people know about the service. It doesn't do any good for you to roll out a service that nobody knows how to use and nobody takes advantage of it. That's death knell for any service.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the keys to rolling out change is also to enable the customer or the user to, perform the action via self-service and to the extent possible, troubleshoot and solve the issue on their own. One thing I find pretty annoying is anytime I have to call the help desk, just don't want to pick up the phone to do that, to call some stranger, prove I am who I say I am, and then have them walk me through the process because we know it's like, half the time they're not even going to be able to help you. So I think that I'm not the only person who doesn't like to call for support. Um, but there is going to have to be some percentage of the population that's going to have to call for support. So I think as you build your process, try to minimize that number. And this goes into the planning of how do we plan for a successful go live is you want to try to roll out the tools to enable the people to do everything through self-service. So say you're rolling out a single sign-on system, or you're rolling out a password change or multi-factor or registering or combining accounts. Combining accounts is a scenario we see a lot in IAM rollouts, right? Where you have like multiple systems and, hey, we're going to get down to one ID. Well, we need people to kind of show us what all the accounts they have are so that we can make sure we're combining the right accounts. So providing those self-service systems, but then having a trained support desk that has enough bandwidth to support the number of calls that you can get. And this reminds me of a project experience I had where, we were rolling out a system to our customers. They were actually dealerships. So it was a B2B scenario. So these were people that we had relationships with, and they had multiple accounts across multiple systems. The idea was we wanted to combine those so they'd have one account to sign in with. And we did a really good job of, putting together from a self-service perspective and estimating that it would be like a 90-10. 90% of the people could solve this through self-service and 10% would not be able to. Then we looked at usage patterns, how often people use the system on a weekly basis. So how many unique visits would we have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, et cetera. So we use that information to say, all right, this is kind of what our traffic will look like. And we should have this number of users. And we said, all right, to be on the safe side, let's give ourselves 25, 30% extra support. So we wound up bringing in a few contractors, or the companies that did our support does brought in a few extra people from other projects, right, to provide some extra support. Now, we had communicated this change so well and let people know on Monday at 8 a.m., this is going live. So, come on over and combine your accounts and you'll have single sign-on, and it'll be the greatest thing since sliced bread. And we must have gotten people so excited that almost everybody came out on Monday morning to combine their accounts. And 90% of the people, and by the way, from a systems perspective, we scaled up our system so our systems didn't crash. By the way, we were hitting some processor utilization that was like, for a little bit there, we were holding our breath, but we fortunately had super oversized servers, but our help desk got slammed. That's 10% of the people, but of a much larger number of people were calling the help desk. And so I guess my learning from that was, really, you've got to go the extra mile. You've got to kind of plan for, you know, more than just 25% of, really think about, okay, what's the worst case scenario here? And I'd rather have people sitting doing nothing, even if I have to pay for them, than to have my users go through a really poor user experience, especially when those users are customers, spending money with your company.
Yeah, I think this is that balance that organizations try to strike is, okay, well, how much is too much support? I'm with you. I would rather have people sitting around doing nothing. I think in a good change, even when you ramp up support, it should not even be noticeable because you've already ramped up the support and it's within, tolerable levels of number of calls per hour or tickets per hour or, whatever it might be, processor utilization in that case. Um, I think of a few different projects where, we've done rollouts in the past and, it was all hands on deck, be aware, here's what's going to happen, be on call, be available, whatever level of support that you're providing to the project or could be. And, what happens when something goes right? Nobody calls. That's great. Right. If you're like a level 3, engineer and it's like, oh, we have a go live this week, I've got to be on call, but nobody ever ends up calling. Yeah. You probably had to give up some time just to be available, but that's a better position than, getting called into some sort of, conference call where things are burning down and, people are looking at you and staring at you, trying to figure out what's wrong and get things back up and running. I'd much rather have way more people than not enough. If I'm going to err on the side of it, I'm definitely going to be on the caution. I'm going to take my stats and say, okay, well, I know we're expecting a 25% surge. I'm going to pad it, give me another 15, 20, maybe double it. How important is the success of that rollout to the organization? Maybe it's to the credibility, maybe of an IAM program just getting off the ground. Maybe it's something that has to do with like an open enrollment season, seasonal work or things like that, where things have to go right and there needs to be a backup plan, support plans, to make sure that everything's kind of addressed. So I'm totally with you on that.
Yeah, I think that if you are going to receive pushback on, covering for that worst case scenario, I think, be prepared to communicate to show that you've thought through the scenario. Here's what we expect. Here are the numbers behind what is normal activity. Here's what we'd expect the bell curve to look like in terms of here's where we're going to hit our peak and the number of people that we think we needed a minimum. But here's the worst case scenario. And we feel that we should plan for the worst case scenario. And here's our plan. Let somebody else say no. Let somebody who's higher up say no. But also, I do think it probably has something to do with who the users are, what industry you're in to some degree, right? And I'm only saying that from the standpoint, like, imagine you are Harley Davidson and your customers are Harley Davidson dealers. And what the work you're doing is on the ordering portal, and the system gets overwhelmed, or the help desk can't reply, and people can't get their orders in. Are they going to start buying like Yamahas, putting them in the Harley Davidson dealer? No way. They're going to wait till the system comes back up, then they'll put in their orders. And believe me, you might get a lot of grief in that period of time. You will get a lot of grief in that period of time, but the company is not going to actually lose money. The only reason I bring that up is now paint the scenario that you're Walmart and your customers come in and they want to buy a sweatshirt and they can't because your IAM process and they can't get into their account for whatever reason. You're forcing them to change their password or whatever. And they just decide to buy that sweatshirt from Amazon. Now you've actually lost money. So in that scenario, it's like you have to plan for the worst case scenario.
Yeah. Absolutely. The more choice the consumer has, the less tolerance there is to a poor experience, unavailable services, just general fails all around. And I think, you know, most of us are not in a position where we have a captive audience and that there are, there are choices to get things done. And that choice may not even be so obvious to you in the IAM space. It could be, well, okay, well, normally I would go in and do this access request by myself, but they have this new system and it stinks. I can't figure out how to use it. I'm just going to call my friend and have them do it, or go around the process and, do it myself through some way that's not documented. So yeah, I mean, you've got to get it right, and you've got to have, make sure you've got enough controls in place to try and prevent some of that if you can. But we're not also fortunate to be, let's say Apple and the only company that makes iPhones. And every year when they have their crush of orders for the new iPhone, right, they've got to get it right. They've gotten better at it. They have certainly struggled in the past, but um, they've adopted and changed even the way they do their orders. So I think it's something for us kind of all to think about.
Yeah, I think, two other things that came to mind as we were talking about that was, one is that piece that I talked about with planning your capacity of your systems, having extra server capacity, or if you are building the systems in order to kind of withstand the crush of some kind of like registration process, then at least having some extra system capacity when you do hit that. So if you're in a kind of a Docker or Kubernetes environment where you can scale up, spin up different containers or extra containers to handle capacity, then you have to bake that into your plan. The other thing I was going to say is I think a big part of planning an IAM rollout is or a big change is around support. But what I was talking about earlier was that first line of support. I think you have to think beyond the first line of support. So who's this, when you hit that call where somebody's calling in, they're doing the right thing, they're doing everything they're supposed to, and the help desk agent can't help them. They've got to escalate that issue to level two, potentially goes up to level three. Think about capacity for at those levels as well.
All hands on deck. Everyone's got to be available. I don't know what else I can say. Just like make sure you've got all the people that you think are going to be there, and then ask those people who they think they're going to need to have for support, and make sure people are aware, because a lot of times it's some sort of, downstream process or system where it's like, oh, okay, I'd love to be able to help you, but I can't get in because VPN is down. Okay, well, let's get whoever handles the VPN stuff on to take care of that. So, think about the second and third order effects, I think, that come through are things to think about when you're going to go live, is making those folks available, and making them aware of what's happening so they can, make their plans for their support as well. Because you may not be 100% in-house when it comes to the support you need. You're going to rely on other business units to also support you through your rollout of your IAM technology or service or process or whatever it may be.
It was just something that literally just crossed my mind. Imagine that your support engineers or your first line support, you had the flu go through your help desk or something like that.
COVID.
Right? COVID, right? I don't know that you necessarily bake that into your plan. I think it's worth a conversation, though. I think if COVID kind of swept through, you might have to call off the go live.
Yeah.
If the flu, or what if it was just one or two key people got sick? I think that's one of the things that speaks to, you don't want to plan your capacity around just barely enough, or even like I was saying later, like I said, oh yeah, we'll do what we think it's going to be plus 25%. That's kind of close, especially if 25% means one extra person.
Well, here's the fun part. You can do all this planning. You can have everything arranged. You've got this perfect plan, and still it can go wrong. I mean, that's the worst part of all this, is you could have the most impeccable, rollout, backup strategy, all the support things in place. And what they say, the best laid plans are just made to be wrecked. And that will certainly happen. But I think still the benefit is, look, you account for as much as you can. If something happens out of your control or whatever it may be, act of God, whatever it is, right? Force majeure, um, something like that is difficult to account for, but it's also a little bit of CYA, I think. It's like, okay, you've demonstrated you've done your due diligence, we've done our checks, everyone's in agreement, we've got sign off, we're good to go. Everybody has essentially turned their keys at the same time and we're ready for launch, whatever it may be. If you have all that kind of document worked out and still things don't work out, sucks. But hey, I feel like, okay, what's something for next time? Now we got to fix. Was it something in the control or not? At least you've got some defense if something goes wrong. Say, hey, we thought of everything we possibly could, and here's this other thing that was beyond our control or whatever it may be. Having that, I think having that documented kind of plan of attack also helps as well from an after action perspective to be able to do a review.
Yeah, there's different types. Use the term back up, and I was thinking of the term back out. So let's say you do your changes the password change. If you roll it out and the screens aren't painting, right? Or, the system's just not ready, you might back out immediately and go to the old version of code. If you've had it up for a day and a half, what does that back out look like? Well, you need to plan through those different scenarios. You should have a plan to handle those potential, it's looking ugly. But I'd say the longer the system's up, the longer or the harder backouts are. That's a general thing.
Yeah, you're
So
going to lose all that transactional data in between. So that's usually sometimes that's not an option.
sometimes not an option.
The only way forward is through, and you have to battle your way through it. Hopefully, it's not that bad. I'm kind of thinking about here about this Grubhub article and the free lunch. Do you think Grubhub notified all of the participants on their platform that they were doing this with enough time for them to be ready for it?
It sure seemed like no.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that made it such an epic failure is social media. Like what I saw on the TV news was like pictures from people's social media accounts of like a picture of a kitchen where there's like 30 bags piled on top of each other for Grubhub, or like a receipt printer with like all these orders that were printed out. So I think it just became very public too. Uh, makes it look potentially makes it look worse. I mean, as long as the restaurants were getting paid, the restaurants probably didn't have the issue. It was really the customers who never got their food, who was expecting their food. And then of course Grubhub probably takes a big hit on it from the standpoint that um, they sure didn't accomplish what they wanted it to accomplish.
Credits they might have to issue for unhappy customers. I mean, I certainly think that the restaurants themselves probably took a hit because think of the workers, right? Trying to like all of a sudden you've got this truly massive tidal wave of orders that all come at the same point. That is going to absolutely wreck your place of work if you're in a restaurant for a while. There are people who are going to be just plain unhappy because you physically cannot support that number of orders at once. Kitchens are
Right.
only so big. There's only so many workers, et cetera. I mean, I always joke when I'm talking to people, it's like, oh, it's kind of a stressful time. Like, let me tell you right now, nothing for me is as stressful as a 5-table section in a Chili's on a Friday night. There's never been stress that is like that since, that's the most stressful I've ever been in any work I've ever had. If I can handle that, I'm good in the business world, quote unquote. Um, it is a problem. And I feel for all my, restaurant worker veterans and compadres out there. They probably got pretty wrecked on this and it's unfortunate.
How do you think Grubhub could have done this better?
I think they probably could have staggered it a little bit, maybe announced it ahead of time, maybe did it in waves of the population instead of just targeting a massive metro like New York City.
Like piloting it.
Piloting it, maybe going, street by street or borough by borough, right? Or restaurant by restaurant or group of cuisines, maybe all at once. Like maybe it's all pizza and the next one is all burgers, right? Or whatever it may be. I think that would have actually been a better plan rather than try and do it all in one day. You draw out the exposure of the quote unquote free lunch and it's done, across a number of days or hours, whatever it may be, rather than just kind of do like this massive spike. I mean, this almost strikes me as like this is maybe something like they were trying to like boost numbers for the market or something like that to kind of
Oh,
show
right.
revenue. Last I don't know if that's true or not. It's purely speculation, but to do it all at once and to have it be this poorly coordinated, um,
It's like it's
yeah, that's
so poorly planned. There must have been some there. It must have been brilliant.
right. Yeah,
It seems so stupid. It
right.
must have been brilliant.
We don't see the genius behind it. Maybe it's the Pentaveret or the Illuminati behind it. We're just not understanding what's going on. You and I of our small brains.
I think the POC idea, though, I mean, there's probably parallels to the IM world where it's like, if you can go small or go home.
Yeah,
It,
to try it out on yourself, get some friendly, beta it, pilot it, work out the kinks in the process. You've got to build that into your project plan though, because that takes time, and you're going to find things that's like, yeah, we thought that was a good idea, and our pilot testers have no idea what that thing is supposed to do. You're going to have to go back and kind of fix it. So, but I'm always a fan of that. I love going to friendly people within the organization that I've made from a relationship standpoint. Say, hey, we're rolling out the service. Would you mind helping us test it? Usually you'll get a pretty good response of that. Doesn't mean you have
yeah,
to like roll it out to everybody, but give someone else a chance to critique your work and you'll be better for it.
yeah, I agree. So, what if it was hate being so negative? Why don't we talk about what things go right? Like, what do you do? Do you have a pizza party at the end of this? I mean, pizza's on my brain right now.
Yeah, obviously. Well, I think this falls into the bucket of, recognition of, hey, we did this thing. And maybe the ideal scenario is that nothing happened because there were no reports of issues. It was almost transparent. Like, oh, we had no idea there was even a change made because it was so smooth and, that's the way it's supposed to be. Or maybe there is some metrics as, hey, we had X number of signups in the first day or 2 days or whatever it may be, whatever your kind of like launch, window is. But I think this goes back to recognition, right? How do you make sure that all those people that you pulled in for these potential doomsday worst case scenario, get some sort of recognition or, maybe even reward if possible. Maybe it's a pizza party, which sounds kind of cliche in the business world. Maybe it's a Grubhub coupon. They can go get their own
Hey, I got this
for,
email that said you gave a free lunch, so I'm going to forward it to you.
maybe it's something else. I think every organization has some sort of employee recognition type thing that they can or maybe should be doing. But I think getting the recognition out there is important for a number of things, right? Kind of demonstrate here's good things that happen when things go well. It's recognizing the efforts of people who maybe went above and beyond during the go live or maybe or even if things went wrong, getting things back on track quickly and smoothly, right? I think you can reward people who are part of the solution, whether it is a successful launch or not. I think you got to think about, how do you make sure that people understand that their work was important, it mattered, and made a difference.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a whole lot to add to that, except that I think that's good advice for not just a go live of something, but I mean, any anyone on your team who's going the extra mile, um, you want to make sure you're rewarding them in that way, especially this time's known as the Great Resignation. We'll have lived through a pandemic followed by the Great Resignation. Um, but I mean, I think one of the things that drives people, I mean, we all want to be compensated. We all want, you know, other perks and benefits, but recognition it doesn't cost anything to tell somebody they're doing a good job. It doesn't cost anything to put their names on a slide. And when you're doing a department update, like, hey, these are the people who work some extra hours, you know, and even if you're paying them for it, it doesn't matter. Like, if they're going the extra mile, like, let let's pat them on the back publicly, because it doesn't cost anything. I remember someone was telling me that their boss said, don't expect me to pat you on the back. I'm just not that type." And I thought, how stupid is that? What does it cost to pat somebody on the back? Not a thing. Pat people on the back.
Yeah, a simple thank you go a long way. I think the only thing that I would modify to what you just said is not everyone likes public recognition. So know your people,
Like,
know, what works, what doesn't work for them, but at least say thank you. At least, yeah, recognize the work that people are doing, and it doesn't have to be a go live, just on a daily basis. I think sometimes we all feel like we're taking for granted. It's cool to get, hey, thanks for doing that. That was a great job. That's a great way to, you know, take something simple and help kind of improve morale or person's feelings or whatever it may be. So yeah, I'm totally with you on that one.
fantastic. Well, for anybody who's listening, we're going to be publishing this on Monday. It's Monday. I'm not sure if you knew this, Jeff, but Monday, May 23rd is Lucky Penny Day. It's
Mm,
also International Turtle Day and International Taffy Day.
Lucky Penny, Turtle, and Taffy Day.
Yeah.
So
And
how
none
do
of
you
these,
celebrate that? Do you feed like taffy to a turtle and then I don't know what you would do with the penny? Flip
I
it
think,
into the pool the turtle's in? I don't know.
I think if any of those resonate with you, pick one, celebrate. If not, there'll be an Identity at the Center episode coming out next Monday, and we'll have a whole new set of days. In fact, the next episode should be on Memorial Day here in the US, which a lot of folks have off. I have off on Memorial Day, so I'm going to be celebrating it somehow.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll think of
But
something. I usually try to come up with, as I'm putting like the social media announcements of, hey, the new episode's available, of like, what day is it today? And I always, I look for something stupid or funny or kind of out of the normal to kind of highlight. And I have not been inspired of any of the holidays that have been showing up recently. And I'm sure I've missed some, I haven't looked at them all, but I usually look on the ones that are happening on the day of launch or maybe a day before or a day after. But I don't know. I don't know if Lucky Penny Turtle Taffy Day will make it part of the announcement. We'll have to listen or watch for it on Monday when I post.
see if we have any, see what other interesting tidbits you can pull out of the episode. But where I was going with that is that today's Friday, and I'm a pretty clean, pretty healthy eater. But Friday's the day I'm I let myself go off the rails a little bit. So my question to you, we're going to end on multiple later notes, but the first one is going to be if it was, Grubhub free meal night, we'll call it Friday night meal night, what would you be getting?
You know, so Grubhub and similars have such a wide menu. I feel that is very location dependent. So we've got lots of really good kind of local restaurants. I would probably order something from Shaku, which is a sushi place in my area that has just fantastic food. It's expensive, but it is really good. If you don't have a local place, and if we're going to stick to something that's maybe more chain, I'd probably go with something like a Chipotle, something like that, maybe.
Mm, I love
What about
both
you?
of those. And you see, sushi is, I don't consider that like, eating my junky food for Friday night, right?
Well, the way
But
I
I
eat
get,
it is
okay. I don't get it like the fried rolls or anything. I get, the pretty healthy stuff.
I do a braised short rib with rice and vegetables. So it's relatively healthy. But that's what I get from a sushi place. It is that good, how good this is. They have other good stuff too, but that's how I roll.
I'm sure I'd be addicted to that place. I also like Chipotle, but I was watching a baseball game this week, and I texted you about this, where every other ad that they would show in this ballpark, it was in Chicago White Sox, was a pizza, one or the other pizza chain. And one of the announcers was talking about Giordano's, and they showed a picture of Giordano's. And I'm like, oh my goodness, that looks so good. So if I could get something free tonight, it would be one of those big deep dish Chicago Giordano's pizzas. And because I'm in Georgia and we don't have that, there is one really good New York style pizza place around here. I would get that. The $33
Deep dish pizza.
pizza I talked about earlier.
I could go with that. I mean, I like pizza as much as anyone else. I am an equal opportunity pizza eater. I will not discriminate, so I'll eat them all. Giordano's deep dish, Lou Malnati's thin crust. That's how I see it in the Chicago area. But everyone has their teams that they played for on that one. So yeah, I have one other one that I want to ask you from a lighter note because this is going to lead me to what I think is an interesting story for me. But what is the strangest thing that happened to you this week?
So the strangest thing that happened to me this week was I've been having some issues with my air conditioner in my car for a while. And I didn't want to bring it to the shop and pay the money to get it fixed because I was sure it would be some 25 or $30 part that would just unplug and I would be able to replace it. So like a fuse or something like that. So what I had done was I replaced all the fuses. I replaced these other um, parts that go in the fuse box. I forget what they're called. And each time I was spending like $25. Nothing was solving the problem. So the problem was it would run for a while and then it would cut off. It would run for a while, then it would cut off. And so then I replaced the entire um, fan myself. And that worked for a little while, but it would only work on full blast. So then I went online and found out, oh, there's this resistor, they call it. And it looks like a processor in a computer with a big heat sink on it. And I replaced that, but I couldn't get the old one out. So I just kind of left it dangling. And then it was like, it still didn't solve the problem. So now I'm about like $125, $150 of parts into this thing, doing it myself over and over. Talking to this guy at the gym, and he's like, I do car work. I come over and I can. So basically, he came over, and the solution for this thing was you just had to take the old resistor out and plug the new resistor in, even though like it was all wired. It had to be in this little slot in the fan because the fan cooled the heat sink off. Because the problem was happening was the heat sink was getting so hot, it was overheating the resistor, and then the air conditioning would go off until the heat sink cooled off, and then it would start running again. So you could imagine this was driving me nuts. And I was thinking, when it's hotter out, it seems to do it more than when it's cooler out, but it still happens when it's cooler out because, I mean, the thing would get like, it's so hot you couldn't even touch it. So essentially, it was like a 2-minute fix.
And instead of going to the professional, you try to do it yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's that's what always seems to happen to me.
Well, here's my story, and this is actually my wife's story. So as you mentioned, I'll be relocating from Chicago area to North Carolina in a little while. My darling wife is down in North Carolina as we speak. Spent the last week kind of house hunting and finding stuff, that we might be interested in, and kind of working through that process. And she was looking at a house in the mountains there around kind of the Blue Ridge Parkway area. And, nice house, everything's great. Talked with a realtor. I'm on, FaceTime with them, kind of looking things over and having a conversation, that sort of thing. And it's like, okay, great, on to the next one. So hang up. About 2 minutes later, I get a FaceTime again from my wife. Okay, what's going on? Forgot something, whatever it may be. And she says to me, "There's a bear in my car." I was like, "What?" There is a bear, bear, the animal, in my car. And she turns the camera around looking at the FaceTime, and she had gotten into the realtor's car. And then sure enough, there's her car with the door open and a bear scrounging around the inside, and gets out and is kind of walking around sort of the driveway where they had been parked. And yeah, that is the strangest thing that happened to me by proxy, to my wife and me by proxy. Apparently the bear took her banana bread out of her car. Somehow she left the door open, and you don't do that, I guess, in that area.
You could be
So yeah, I don't know if
there.
you've ever had a bear in your car, but there was literally a bear in my wife's car, scrounging for food. And it must have been a cub or something, but it was a decent size. It was probably like 5 feet, maybe.
Had to be. Had to be a decent size because if it was a real cub, it would be with its mother. That's scary. That's where you're moving, man.
Yeah. Well, not to that house.
But to that area, and you've heard the saying before, loaded for bear,
Yeah.
which means that you have to have a gun with like enough
Stopping power. Yep.
stopping power. This is where you're moving, but hey, good
Well, there's
luck.
bears, there's bobcats, we have dogs, try to convince them like these are things we have to be, concerned about. And I think this, hopefully this finally set that. It's like, oh yeah, okay, there actually are bears in this area of the world. That's not something that I have to deal with. I have deer, dogs, the occasional coyote, and that's about it. So that'll be a
Yeah.
new experience for me.
Well, they say black bear don't attack people, so I think you should be okay. But you got to watch out for the dogs. I mean, if you leave the dogs in the yard, and I mean, dogs can be aggressive towards other animals, and bears not going to take any guff from a dog.
Yeah, we're gonna have to figure that one out for sure. So I thought that was interesting. That is a first for my wife and myself. So I thought that was interesting watching this all happen essentially over FaceTime video.
I went
This bear.
backpacking. I went backpacking through Yosemite, with just I wanted to see a bear in the wild so badly, and we backpacked from Tuolumne Creek, which is way out in the park, all the way downhill into the valley, and it was quote unquote infested with bear, and we didn't see a single bear for 3 days.
I'm sure they saw you. They were probably hiding up in the trees, just watching, waiting.
Yeah, you have to put your food in these containers that they look like little beer kegs, and you're supposed to tie them up and then put them up in a tree, and it's yeah, there were actually bear there. We didn't see them.
Well, hopefully that bear enjoyed the banana bread and goldfish crackers, courtesy of my wife. So
Now you got me one banana bread too. I mean, it's a problem. I'm hungry.
yeah, you got deep dish pizza and banana bread. That is not a combination that I would expect, but you do you, Jimmy.
I think I could do it. I could do it.
I have faith. All right, should we go ahead and wrap it up for this week?
Let's do it.
All
We'll
right,
be
we're
back
hitting up on
next
an
week.
hour. Yeah, we're hitting up on an hour here. That's pretty much where we want to call the line. So don't forget to visit us on the web, identitycenter.com, or on Twitter at IDAC Podcasts. We have a YouTube channel. You can find it at idac.live. It's on a little bit of a hiatus here while I'm figuring out my life, so to speak, and schedule. And with that, we'll go ahead and leave it. Thanks, Jim, for being part of this. And thank you all for listening. And we'll talk with everyone in the next one. Thanks for listening to the Identity at the Center podcast. If you like what you heard, don't forget to subscribe and visit us on the web at identityatthecenter.com.